Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Octopus Builds, where we are building out the Trident project for the fictional company Octo Pet Shop. Now, over the past couple of episodes, we've really focused in on various security settings. So we have gone ahead and we've created a number of different teams to prevent developers from being able to push to production, at the same time allowing web admins to have the ability to push to production, but they don't have any capabilities to edit any of the deployment processes. And recently we focused in on allowing the ability to go ahead directly to staging if we have some sort of emergency fix that we need to make, while we have other versions sitting in dev and QA that we don't want to overwrite. So far, we're getting closer and closer to that security nirvana, but our security team, they have informed me that they have an additional company policy that we need to meet. And what that is we want to make sure that there is some sort of approval process that occurs prior to anyone coming in and making a change to the deployment process. So for example, I could just come in here and if I wanted to, actually let's just change this one first because that's easier. I could change this message easy peasy and say removed from load balancer, and I could just add something as stupid as an S. And I can save this, and the next release that gets created, it will automatically pick up that change, and that can cause a bit of a concern for some customers. Now, how we're going to accomplish our goal is we're going to be leveraging the new feature and functionality that was released in Octopus Deploy 2022.1 called Config as Code. So I'm currently running a cloud version of Octopus Deploy, which is running 2022.3, but any version that's in the 2022 or newer range, it will work for. So let's talk a little bit about config as code. So config as code, the idea is that we will store this deployment process as you see it in a Git repository. And Git is a source control platform that you can use to store your various source code, any sort of scripting files, any sort of configuration or anything in a centralized location for others to take advantage of. Now, because this is just a personal project and this is a personal build that I'm doing for y'all, I'm going to be using my personal account for this. And what I have set up is let me jump over to GitHub. So I'm going to be using GitHub for this. Now, for this to work, you need to have some sort of Git credentials ready to go. If you're using Azure DevOps, or if you're using GitLab or Atlassian's Bitbucket, it should generally work pretty much the same. But for the purposes of this, I'm going to be using GitHub. Now, I'm on my profile page, and you can get to this once you log into GitHub. You do need an account if you're following along. And you can come in here. If you click on your profile, that's what this page is. In case you're curious what I look like, that's what I look like. All right. Now, what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to save our source control our deployment process into version control. Now, I already have a project ready to go. The Trident application is already a repository. So think of a repository as a project, or it's a place to store a bunch everything that's related to this particular application. Now you can see that I've gone ahead and I've created this, and this has existed for a little while. If you do not have the Trident repository, if this is the first time you're using GitHub ever, you can easily create a new repository. You will need a repository for this. You can click on New, and then you can select your owner. I belong to a number of different organizations. I'm just going to be making myself the owner. You can give it a name. So in my case, I can just call it Trident New or something like that, as long as it's unique to your particular organization or your particular user. You can give it a description. Opt for public or private. You know, honestly, I typically opt for private just because I don't want people to see what I'm doing. No other reason than that. You can add a README file if you choose to do this. Git ignore template. The application is going to be, you really don't need one, to be completely honest. Because I'm a .NET developer, I typically just pick Visual Studio because that's just the way I roll. I think almost by rote, just rote practice, just constantly doing it almost by momentum. I just kind of naturally always select that. I think that's kind of funny. And then license, there are a number of different licenses. I would probably stick to like Apache or MIT. Those are going to be the most permissive, and basically it is the licenses. Basically, this repository is provided as is. If this is going to be a private repository, honestly, you don't really need one. But once you're ready to go, if you go ahead and click on Create Repository, it will create the repository automatically for you, and then you can come in here and you'll be presented with a view similar to this. So now we have the repository created. I already have mine. Typically, for a lot of our customers or a lot of our users, they will already have a repository where they're storing the application source code. And I typically recommend storing the deployment process and the application source code in the same repository, just because how you deploy that application is rather important to the whole concept of, it's rather important to the application in and of itself. So they should be stored together. It makes a lot of sense. All right, so I have my repository. The next thing I need is I'm going to need an ability to authenticate myself to GitHub from Octopus Deploy. So let's jump over to Settings. I'm going to scroll on down to my developer settings. And we're going to want to create a personal access token. And you might be wondering, it's like, oh my gosh, you're about to show me a personal access token. Calm down, I'm going to delete this personal access token as soon as I'm done recording this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to generate a new token. And I'm going to say Octopus builds, give it an expiration date. 7 days is a bit much, to be completely honest. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. You know, it really is up to you and your policy. I would probably opt for 60 or 90 days, just to kind of get you an idea of what's going on. And then I will, because I have a private repository, I am going to give it access to my private repository. I'm not going to give it anything else, and I'm going to go ahead and generate my token. And so this is the token that it generated for me. So I'm going to go ahead and copy it. Now let's jump back over to Octopus Deploy. And I want to save this token so I can use it in the future. I'm going to add Git credential. So I'm going to add a Git credential. And I'm just going to call this GitHub Personal Access Token. Give it the name, as I say, my PAT for GitHub. Why not? Username, I'm going to provide my username, and then I'm going to paste in my personal access token from earlier. So I can go ahead and click on Save. And that is it. I have my personal access token saved into my Octopus Deploy instance. Now we're ready to go ahead and convert my projects, my Trident project, over to using source control. So let's jump back over to GitHub, and I'm going to go back to my repositories, open up Trident. So what I'm going to provide is I'm going to copy in the HTTPS URL. And I'm going to jump into Trident. And then I'm going to scroll on down to version control. And this is where you're going to want to put in the URL we just had. Give it the default branch name. Make sure that it is main. It should be main. Yes, it is main. So this is the default branch that you're going to commit to. Then I'm going to select my library, my GitHub Personal Access Token. I can leave this as is because I'm only going to have one project for this application. If I were to have multiple projects, I could do something like where it's .octopus slash say the web UI in this case, or you could do something like database or something like that where you're doing different components. For this particular application, for this particular example that we're building out, everything's going to be done in one. Everything's going to be deployed in one process when it's all said and done. So I can go ahead and let's test this. Everything looked good. And click on Configure. And so I'm about to configure the Trident project to use version control. It is important to note that this process is a one-way conversion. If anything goes wrong, I'm going to have to recreate this. Hopefully nothing goes wrong. Fingers crossed. I'm 99.99% sure nothing's going to go wrong, but never know. I'm just going to say convert Trident project to use, I'm going to say convert configure. Why not? In Octopus. And I'm going to go ahead and commit this change. So the reason why something like that is needed is because we're actually converting this process over and we're creating it, and now we're going to store that process in source control, so it needed to commit that, it needed to perform that initial commit. And now things are stored inside of source control. So the UI has changed a little bit. Now I have a message telling me about a new thing where we're introducing slugs in OCL. I'm going to go ahead and close that. I also have access to branches as well as tags and commits. So I can let's go ahead and I can enter the commit hash or anything along those lines. So I only have one branch, but the UI has changed ever so slightly. Creating a release, the UI has also changed ever so slightly. I'm going to go ahead and just create a release for right now, 1.1.3. But let's go back here really quick because I wanted to point this out. You can choose a branch or a tag or commit to use when you want to create a particular release. So that's rather handy. So I can, in theory, for when I'm, say, if I was on a different branch, if I was changing some things, I was doing any sort of work, I could test out that branch or test out that deployment process without affecting my main deployment process. So that's fantastic to be able to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and deploy this. You'll also notice that the UI has changed up here, and now I've added in the main tag. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy this release. Now once it gets to this point, it's pretty much the exact same experience that you've always had before. The main difference is now you get the process snapshot for this. This additional information is being added. While we're waiting for this to finish running, let's take a look at GitHub. And I'm going to refresh my screen. And now you see a new folder was added called .octopus. And I have 3 files that were added in here: the deployment process, deployment settings, and schema version. So the deployment process, this is the deployment process that we've been looking at all this time, and it is now written in what's known as Octopus Configuration Language, or OCL. It's an offshoot of HashiCorp's Configuration Language, or ACL, but it is written specifically for Octopus Deploy. So it's a subset of all the features and functionality of HCL. And not only in here, I can make a number of different changes. If I wanted to, I could edit this process here and go ahead and hit 2, and I can say updated max parallelism to 2. And I can commit it right here. And now if I were to come back to my deployment process overview, oops, gotta click on the right thing. It should automatically pick this up. And now it's going to run on 2 targets at a time. So it went ahead and automatically picked that up for me. I can also revert that change if I so desire. Let's just edit the file. I can, if I say, going back to 1 or something like that. Okay, so, but I have everything stored in in source control, and I get all this great functionality where I can see when the changes were made. I can view the blame. I can see, oops, got it. I can see that, got that initial project. I can see I was changing this file. I can click on this, and I can see everything that's been happening within this particular file. That's great, but the business use case that we have is we want to prevent people from being able to edit the main deployment process without, we want to make sure that they have to get approval. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to set what's known as a branch protection policy. So if I come into here, I can add a branch protection rule. So this is my default branch, is my main branch. Let's add this. Branch name pattern, main, and I will require a pull request before merging, number of approvals, and it has to include administrators. That's the only other thing that you have to, because I'm the owner of this repository, I'm considered the administrator, so I have to also check that box. Otherwise, it will go ahead and just allow it to go through if using my personal access token. Oh, that's the downside of a private repository. Jeez. I should have made this a public repo. And I'm going to go ahead and just do that, just because I can. I'm gonna uncheck this, sorry. While I'm doing this, merge commits, archives, purchases, change visibility. I'm going to make this public. Just type this in. So if you do need to make this public, that's the reason why. Alrighty. So I have made this public. So if I come back here, I should see, yep, branch protection policy. So what does this look like for Octopus Deploy? So now, if I wanted to remove that very poor spelling, or that poor English, if I were to come in here and I were to try to commit here, I can just say fix up a error log, and I were to go ahead and try to commit this, I'm going to get a big old fat error because there's a protected, my main branch is now protected. So let's try this again, and I'm going to create a new branch. I'm just going to say fix up English because I speak English well, apparently. All right, so I have changed this over. It automatically switched over to fix up English. I'm going to go and refresh the branch list, so it's now selected that. If I were to come back to my main branch, you would see that the S now reappears. So let's go ahead and go back to fix up English. So now we can see that it's been removed. So I'm going to change this back to main for right now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a pull request. So a pull request, what that is I have two branches. I have main and I have fix up English. I want to basically pull all the changes from fix up English into main. So I'm going to create and compare and do a pull request. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this. And it's going to say I'm merging fix up English into main. And I'm going to say I'm going to go ahead and create the pull request. At least one approver. I wonder if I need to set this. I wonder if I need to change this up. Assign myself. I might need to fix this really quick. So there's the downside of doing a personal project. So let's go ahead and let's change some branch protection policies. I'm just going to go ahead and uncheck that because it's obviously going to have a real big problem, this being a personal project. So now it has, basically I've met the minimum requirements that I've set up. So I'm going to go ahead and merge my pull request, confirm the merge. And then I can also delete this branch. Now, the nice thing about this is I kind of skipped over this step, but most people, when they do a pull request, they can also come in and they can actually see the changes that are being made. They can see, oh, no, I'm going to 2. Going to have load balancers. Now it's going to be load balance. So hindsight being what it is, I probably should have picked up on that and said, actually I should change that to be 1 before I merge that into my source control. Excuse me, before I merge that into my main branch. So that was a mistake. And that, again, that's the reason why you'd want to take a look at the file prior to approving it. But now, if I were to refresh this, so let's just come click on process. I will not see that branch anymore because it has been deleted. And if I were to click on this, now I would see that that S has been removed. So now we have met all of the requirements given to us by our security team. Now we do require an approver before we check into our main branch or our main deployment process. Now for many enterprise customers, they probably also have a number of different integrations set up. Their branch protection policy is going to be a little bit more robust than my personal one. And then finally, I do want to point out that the personal access token that I'm using for this is my personal access token, hence the name, assigned to myself, Bob J. Walker. For customers that are, for a development shop or whatever the case may be, where it's not a personal project like this, you would want to have some sort of service account and set up a personal access token for that service account, and not use individual accounts like this, because you can only have one account. In this particular case, I'm using this authentication. You can only use that particular account. So if anyone else were to sign on to this instance and they would start making changes to the deployment process, everything would show up as being done by me. So we'd want to have that be a service account, and it will actually tell us if we go into the error, into the commit messages, it should say I authored this and then Octopus Deploy committed it for me. So we try to make it as apparent as possible as to what's going on, but again, you want to make sure that it will tell you everything that's occurring on something like this. So again, use a service account. Don't use your own personal account in a real world setting. For this, it's fine. Just use a personal account. So that is it for today's episode. It did go a little bit longer than I'd like it to go. I hope that you found it useful. This is a pretty big topic within Octopus Deploy. And I will see you next week. Thank you very much.